we're talking about co-teaching and how you work well with how do you work well with your co-teacher? So if you could just tell us about what y'all do to plan.
Okay. Well, it's very important for the two adults in the early childhood classroom to work together as a team and to communicate well with each other. So that includes before class, after class, and also those spontaneous times during class, those things that arise. And so depending on whether you have one Montessori teacher and one assistant, or whether you have co-teachers, the one that you just have observed possibly from my class is the second teacher along with me is going through her practicum. So she's beginning to give some lessons as well.
Mhm.
So we especially plan out before each day or each week what she'll be showing. And then it's just a little bit more spontaneous for me since I've been doing this for over 20 years. So sometimes a child will just in the moment, show mastery of a certain thing and want to do something. And I'll say, oh, okay, let's go ahead and you get out your rug, I'll show you this lesson. That's when I would walk over to my co-teacher and let her know that I'm going to be giving a lesson and for her to please watch the group. And so it is just vital for this age children, the 3 to 6 early childhood children, that one of the adults in the classroom at all times be watching the group.
Mhm.
So even more so for those classes, which is pretty much all the classes that have children who are at risk for learning differences. So they have a more difficult time self-regulating. And so they're just not quite as independent and able to kind of function independently. So it's very important for one adult as much as possible to have eyes on the group as a whole. And so that means as she or he is moving around the classroom to make sure that even body positioning is important. So to have your back towards kind of the wall and be able to see if you stop over at a child's table or desk to help them, make sure that you're trying to get again on that side where you can kind of be watching, but kind of peripherally seeing the group. And so, and also as that second teacher is kind of moving around and kind of floating around and helping guide and kind of being that external regulation system for the child. It's important to kind of make that a kind of a quick type of address and then move on. And so let's see. So as far as planning, it's good to have a certain written plan. Like for instance, we use a little simple form that has a picture of each one of the areas, the practical life, the sensorial, so on, cultural, math, language, oral language, a little picture, and then a little space by each one where there's several works written down, whether they're ones that they've been recently shown and need to practice, or that we make a star by it if it's one they need to be shown a lesson of. So again, if a teacher, perhaps a second teacher, or any teacher that needs to kind of just remember what that child needs to work on, if they're having a little bit harder time choosing and initiating, they can kind of go over and say, well, let's take a look. Let's see what you've had a lesson on recently. Oh, you've had this and this. And then I would usually give them kind of limited choices so that they're still making a decision, but I'm giving them, a choice of a couple of works to work on. So that's kind of a way to also kind of plan and be prepared for helping connect the child to the work. But as far as giving the lesson, as I mentioned, just give a heads up, if you've been working for a long time with that teacher, it doesn't always require you to walk across the room and say, I'm going to be showing a lesson. Can you watch? Sometimes just making eye contact and doing, you watch, type thing. And so the other one's like, oh yeah. So sometimes it gets to be it's a really good marriage, hopefully. So it's just very important, like I said, to communicate and to follow through at the end of the day, if something arose that needs addressing, those types of things. So
That's great. Okay, so one of the things that I noticed when I was observing your classroom is that, and you had just mentioned that the other teacher that's teaching with you is currently going through her practicum. So she's working through that. And she had brought over she was helping a child who had selected a work of the stacking the pink blocks.
Okay. Yes.
And she had selected a specific sheet for that child that I think you felt like the child wasn't ready for or hadn't been taught yet.
Right.
And so talk to me a little bit about, because I think that's very helpful. You kind of intervened to help her talk about how you did that, or about how you because that's kind of hard when you're trying to teach someone. So talk about that.
Yes. Well, the extra charts, the extra kind of control charts and pictures that go along with some of the sensorial dimensional works, like the pink cubes, the pink tower, the brown stair, the red rods. We have some where after the child has mastered the basic lesson
Mhm.
of grading and building either the tower or the stair. Then yes, later after they've worked extensively with it, there are what we call extensions, so they can create, they can follow and see if they can duplicate what they're seeing, which is a challenge for some children, or they can even get creative later on and do some of their own design work. And so it was just a little early that was brought in, so the child had only in the last few days been shown the lesson, and then he was able to do it correctly, so that she thought that, oh, it's time to go ahead and give him something else. And so it was just a little early for that. And so after I kind of, both of us, both she and I, had kind of noticed and observed him struggling to do some different things. And actually this happens to be a child who is who only speaks Spanish, so it's also
Yes.
there were several challenges, right?
Yes.
And so my co-teacher is bilingual, so so there was a lot of things going on as far as the language. And as far as him being not a Montessorian, so I'll also preface it by saying that this is summer school. And so most all except for 2 of the children have not been in Montessori. And so this is the 7th day. So
Yes,
again, there's
like
just
brand new.
you take it kind of easy. And so
Yes.
I will say that raises a good point also, that sometimes I've noticed over the years that the newer Montessori teachers kind of make the mistake of giving the lessons a little too quickly.
Mhm.
As far as, just sometimes trust that they need to practice, let them practice thoroughly many of the things before you feel like you need to show more. So,
Mhm.
so that's something that is pretty common that I see. So yes, it was just, I'm not sure whether I handled it as perfectly as could be, but I kind of, mentioned to her that he was not ready for this.
Mhm.
And so she agreed. She's like, oh yes, I see that, so type
Mhm.
of thing. So yes, I mean, there are times when you don't always get to go over and say, hey, how about we try the card? It was perfectly good that she tried that, and then we just observe and see, and then sometimes you do have to put on the brakes and just, you can even let the child do it, and then you'll just notice that next time, not going to, encourage the cards yet, not yet until he's done some work.
Something I think that's happens to every teacher is somebody gets sick and they're out. And so often you might have a substitute teacher or someone that's coming in to assist that's maybe not normally in your classroom. How do you communicate with someone who is new to your classroom?
Well, we do have a set list of people who can come in, and so fortunately, several of those that have come in have either worked with this age children regularly or, over the years have learned it. But that's a very good point for those that have not, that come in kind of not knowing, right?
Mhm.
And so we do have, pre-printed and the schedule. So the schedule is all there as far as what we're doing when we're doing it. Absolutely, there would need to be one adult in there that does know, the system. So, but the second one, it's mainly just, there's a lot of classroom management, a lot of just reminding the children to use their inside voice, or to, we will oftentimes just kind of give them one reminder, and then say, oh, you're showing that you need to move to another table or something like that. So there's a lot of little just gentle redirection involved in being an assistant or a substitute in this type of classroom. And so, but yes, the ideal is that they have some little bit of crash course training, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's, for years I've thought, well, to have assistants that don't know exactly how a Montessori classroom works, that's important to have, so I, as much as possible, try to give a little bit of like I said, a little short tutorial on, this is what we're doing, and this is how, if you need to address something, walk over to them and don't call across the room, as much as possible, kind of keep moving, don't stay in one area, kind of, the more we're kind of floating, but being discreet and not being in somebody's space. Sometimes somebody coming in as a substitute who has perhaps taught in other settings and not Montessori doesn't know how to kind of stay back, hang back. So they kind of assert themselves into the child's work where they should not. So that's what sometimes I have to directly, remind an adult that we're staying out of their work and just observing and watching, and then if they come to us or we see they're really struggling, first we let them try to work through and problem solve themselves. And then, we can kind of offer, we can say, would you like me to help you with that or something like that? So those are the main ones, kind of not asserting, needlessly into a child's work, not being too loud, just kind of being moving, but yet, just gentle and kind of peaceful and quiet, and that type of demeanor is kind of important.
Okay, so the last question I have is around parent communication. So here at Shelton, we have a very specific model for how we handle our parent-teacher conferences. Not all schools have the same model, but whenever you are preparing for a parent-teacher conference, or advisor teacher conference, whatever you want to call it, how do you handle, communicating with your co-teacher or your assistant, and who sits down with the parents? Do you both sit down with the parents? Can you kind of talk about that?
Okay. Well, again, it kind of depends, how much experience the second teacher has. I mean, I love for them to give anecdotal examples of things that we're talking about and kind of join in. But I will say that, having been in it for so many years, I do kind of take the lead as far as doing that. And so oftentimes my second teacher is just very comfortable and listening and learning and taking some notes. We do take some just general notes. But again, I do encourage this, the other teacher or teachers to communicate. We also have, SLPs, therapists come in and tell what they're experiencing as far as that goes. So again, it's just kind of depending on their experience and their level of comfort with sharing those types of things, right? So obviously we try to be positive minded. Anything that we're working on, we term it in, we use the verbiage that this is what we're working on, this is what we're seeing, those types of things. And so but as far as communicating, it's mainly the lead teacher or but like I said, if you have co-teachers, it could be very well shared, if both teachers are really just more of a sharing type of team. So yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, hold on. I just thought of one more.
Okay.
So advice for new teachers specifically, or advice for teachers specifically when, working with a co-teacher, or working with someone new, or maybe if you're working with someone difficult, or I don't, like, how do you?
Right.
What is?
Okay. All right. Are we going again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anytime.
Well, it's helpful, and I haven't always done this, but it's helpful to have things spelled out, right? So like, these are your responsibilities and these are mine, and these are ones that we share, and, and those types of things. So the more we can have things just spelled out and know what's expected, because, that's just important. And thinking back over the years of the partners that I've had, I mean, I want that second teacher to be feeling like they're growing. And so maybe at the beginning of the year, perhaps they're not, showing lessons or doing this or leading the group, small group time or something like that. But I want that to kind of grow and become, something that does kind of develop. And so, but communicating those needs, and I think as the second teacher, I would love to hear them say, is this something that I could do? Or is this something? So I encourage those new teachers to ask. I remember when I was a new teacher, that's what I needed to do. I was like, I've recently been shown this. Can I show this to a child? Because sometimes that lead teacher, and I've become this way. It's just so secondhand. I just like jump in and just do it. Right. And I don't always stop and think, hey, maybe my second teacher would like to get some experience at showing this. So I encourage those new ones to just speak up and advocate for yourself and ask if you can show something, and and just, but also be humble. I mean, that's the best thing to do, is just to come in, realize that you've got a lot to learn. Every day I learn something new, even doing this over 20 years, and so again, the whole letting go and trusting the Montessori system and not feeling the need to be in control. That's something that it's a challenge for a lot of us teachers, because a lot of us are kind of authoritative. And so it's good to be authoritative without being authoritarian, right? And so be very structured, be very, say what you mean and mean what you say, and when the children figure out that, hey, she does mean it when she says this, and so be consistent and be firm, but be kind and loving, and just try to communicate as best you can with your co-teacher.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
All right.